The conference room at Sterling Financial smelled like expensive cologne and betrayal. I stood there holding a crumpled dollar bill in one hand and my wife's underwear in the other, trying to process what had just happened. My name is David Morrison. I'm 38 years old, and until about 90 seconds ago, I thought I understood my life. "Don't wait up for your wife tonight, Morrison," Richard Caldwell said, my boss of 6 years, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "I'll take real good care of her." The entire executive team was watching. 23 people in tailored suits, holding champagne flutes, their faces a mixture of shock and barely concealed amusement. And there was Nicole, my wife of 11 years, sitting on Richard's lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her face was flushed, whether from alcohol or embarrassment I couldn't tell. But she wasn't moving. Wasn't protesting. Just sat there, her hand resting on Richard's shoulder like she owned him. I'd brought her to this party, introduced her to these people, bragged about how she'd just been promoted to senior marketing director at her firm. And now here she was, making me look like the biggest fool in Chicago. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below about what you think is going to happen next, and smash that like button. Trust me, you don't want to miss where this goes. I looked down at the dollar bill again. Written on it in red ink was a single word: rental. Like I was some kind of service being paid for use of my wife. The lace underwear was definitely Nicole's. I'd bought them for her last Valentine's Day, black with red trim. She'd worn them this morning when we got dressed for the party. My hands started shaking. Not from sadness, not even from anger yet, from the sheer disbelief that this was actually happening. That my boss had just publicly humiliated me in front of the entire leadership team. That my wife was complicit in it. "David?" That was Jennifer Park, the CFO, stepping toward me with concern in her eyes. "Are you okay?" I wasn't okay, but something cold and calculating was settling over the initial shock. Some instinct for self-preservation that came from growing up poor on the South Side, from fighting my way through state college while working 3 jobs, from building a career in finance where one wrong move could cost you everything. "I'm fine," I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, distant. "Just need to make a phone call." I walked out of that conference room with every eye following me. Took the elevator down 43 floors to street level. The August heat hit me like a wall when I stepped outside, but I welcomed it. Needed something real and physical to ground me in the moment. I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus Foster, my attorney and college roommate. He answered on the second ring. "Dave, what's wrong? You sound weird." "I need divorce papers drawn up." "Tonight," I said, watching cars stream past on Michigan Avenue. "And I need you to dig into Richard Caldwell's finances. My boss. I think he's been embezzling from the company and I'm going to prove it." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, "What happened?" "He's sleeping with Nicole. Just threw her underwear at me in front of the entire executive team. Paid me $1 for the privilege." I laughed, and it came out harsh and bitter. Funny thing is, I don't even care about Nicole anymore. But he humiliated me publicly, and that's a mistake he's going to regret. "I'll have papers ready by morning," Marcus said, his voice turning professional. "Meet me at my office at 7 a.m. And Dave, don't go home tonight. Stay somewhere else. Let them think they broke you." I hung up and looked at my reflection in a shop window. I was wearing the Tom Ford suit Nicole had insisted I buy, the Rolex she'd given me for our 10th anniversary, the Italian shoes that cost more than my first car, all the trappings of success, and none of it meant anything now. My phone buzzed. A text from Nicole. "Where did you go? Richard is just joking around. Come back upstairs." I deleted it without responding. Another text, this time from Richard. "No hard feelings, Morrison. Just a little executive bonding. Your wife's a good sport about it." I smiled. Actually smiled. Because Richard Caldwell had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He thought he'd broken me. Thought I'd slink away defeated. Maybe quit. Definitely too embarrassed to ever challenge him again. He didn't know that I'd been building a file on his activities for 8 months. Didn't know that I'd discovered irregularities in the acquisition accounts. Didn't know that I'd been waiting for the right moment to expose him, and he'd just handed it to me gift-wrapped. I called my brother next. Tyler Morrison answered with music blaring in the background. He was 4 years younger than me, owned 3 successful auto repair shops, and had a guest room in his house in Oak Park. "Ty, I need a place to crash tonight, and maybe for a while." "Done. What happened?" "Long story. I'll tell you when I get there. The third call was harder. I dialed my mother's number in Bridgeport, where she still lived in the same house my father had bought in 1985 before the cancer took him when I was 12. She picked up on the fourth ring, slightly out of breath. David, is everything okay? Mom, Nicole and I are getting divorced. I'll explain everything later, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. Silence. Then, did she cheat on you? My mother had never liked Nicole. Said she was too ambitious, too focused on appearances, too concerned with status. I'd dismissed it as old-fashioned thinking, but mothers have a way of being right about these things. Yeah, Mom, she did. I'm sorry, baby. But you know what? You're better off. That girl never appreciated what she had. We talked for a few more minutes, before I hung up and started walking. Not to Tyler's place yet. Not anywhere specific. Just walking, letting the evening air cool the burning humiliation that was slowly transforming into something else, something harder and more focused. By the time I reached Grant Park, the sun was setting over the lake, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I found a bench and sat down, pulling out my phone to review the evidence I'd been collecting on Richard. 8 months ago, I'd noticed discrepancies in the quarterly reports. Nothing huge. Just small inconsistencies in the numbers that didn't quite add up. Being a senior financial analyst meant I saw things other people missed. Patterns in data that revealed truth beneath the surface. I'd started digging quietly, staying late at the office, running reports that weren't part of my official duties, cross-referencing acquisitions with actual market values. What I found was a systematic pattern of overpayment for acquired companies, with the excess money disappearing into shell corporations. Richard Caldwell wasn't just my boss. He was the chief operating officer of Sterling Financial, responsible for mergers and acquisitions. Over the past 3 years, he'd orchestrated 14 acquisitions totaling $340 million. And I was now certain that at least $45 million of that had been siphoned off through fraudulent valuations and kickback schemes. I had spreadsheets, bank records I'd obtained through perfectly legal means, emails Richard had been careless enough to send from his company account, testimony from a whistleblower at one of the acquired companies who'd reached out to me confidentially. Everything I needed to destroy him professionally and likely send him to prison. The only thing I'd been missing was the right moment to act. Going after a C-level executive requires perfect timing and ironclad evidence. Make your move too early and they'll bury you. But wait for them to make a mistake, to get overconfident, to reveal their true character publicly, and suddenly you have leverage. Richard had just given me that moment. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Nicole. David, please come back. This is embarrassing. People are asking where you went. I typed back, ask Richard. He seems to have all the answers tonight. Her response came immediately. You're being childish. It was just a joke. Meet me at Marcus Foster's office tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. He'll have papers for you to sign. What papers? Divorce papers. Since Richard's taking such good care of you, I figure you won't need me anymore. My phone started ringing. Nicole calling. I sent it to voicemail. It rang again. Voicemail. Then a text. David, answer your phone. I turned it off completely and sat there watching the lake darken as night fell. Around me, the city was coming alive with evening activity. Joggers on the path, couples holding hands, families heading home from the museum. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that my entire existence had just imploded and rebuilt itself in the space of an hour. Eventually, I got up and caught the train to Oak Park. Tyler's house was a modest 2-story in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors and kids still played in the streets. He opened the door before I could knock, 2 beers already in hand. You look like hell, he said, passing me a bottle. Feel worse. We sat on his back deck, and I told him everything. Not just about tonight, but about the whole 11 years with Nicole. How we'd met at a charity fundraiser, her working for a nonprofit, me trying to network my way into better career opportunities. How she'd seemed perfect, ambitious, intelligent, beautiful. How I'd proposed after 6 months because I was afraid someone else would snatch her up. Red flag number 1, Tyler interrupted. Never marry someone because you're afraid of losing them. Marry them because you can't imagine living without them. There's a difference. He was right. Looking back now with clarity that comes from devastation, I could see that our entire relationship had been built on fear and competition rather than love. Nicole wanted a successful husband who could provide the lifestyle she craved. I wanted a trophy wife who made me look successful. We'd both gotten what we wanted, and it turned out neither of us really wanted it at all. "What are you going to do?" Tyler asked after I'd finished. "Destroy Richard Caldwell's life," I said simply, "and divorce Nicole with maximum prejudice." "That's my brother." Tyler clinked his beer against mine. "Need any help?" "Maybe. Depends on how ugly this gets." That night, I slept better than I had in months. No tossing and turning, no waking up at 3 a.m. with work anxiety. Just solid, dreamless sleep in Tyler's guest room, the kind of rest that comes from finally having clarity about your situation. At 6:30 a.m., my phone came back to life with a barrage of messages. 17 from Nicole, 5 from Richard, 3 from Jennifer Park. Even one from the CEO's assistant, asking me to call the office immediately. I ignored all of them and drove to Marcus Foster's office in the Loop. He was waiting with coffee in a thick manila folder. "Divorce papers are ready," Marcus said, sliding them across his conference table. "Illinois is a no-fault state, but with evidence of infidelity, we can argue for a favorable division of assets. How much are we talking about?" "Joint savings of about $180,000. The house is worth maybe $650,000. We owe $420,000. 2 cars, both paid off. Her 401k has about $90,000. Mine has $240,000. Marcus nodded, making notes. "Any prenup?" "No." "Kids?" "No, thank God." "That makes it cleaner." He looked up at me. "Dave, I have to ask. Are you sure about this? Sometimes people do stupid things when they're drunk. Maybe—" "Marcus, she was sitting on his lap. She let him humiliate me in front of 24 colleagues. This isn't a drunken mistake. This is who she is." "Okay." He pushed the papers toward me. "Sign here, here, and here. I'll have them served to her at her office this afternoon. Maximum impact." "Good. Now tell me about Richard Caldwell." I spent the next hour laying out everything I'd discovered. The shell corporations, the inflated acquisitions, the kickback schemes. Marcus took notes, asked pointed questions, and by the end, he was smiling. "This is federal securities fraud," he said. "This is prison time. How much of this can you prove?" "All of it. I have documents, emails, bank records, and I have a witness willing to testify." "Then we need to go to the SEC and FBI simultaneously. But Dave, you need to understand something. Once you do this, there's no going back. You're ending Richard's career and possibly sending him to prison. Sterling Financial might even go down in the scandal. You could lose your job." I'd already thought about this, spent most of the night thinking about it, actually. And I'd realized something important. I didn't care. The job that had defined my adult life suddenly seemed meaningless. What good was success if it came at the cost of your dignity? "Do it," I said. "Today." "What about Nicole?" "What about her? She made her choice." As if on cue, the conference room door burst open. Nicole stood there, her hair disheveled, still wearing last night's dress, makeup smudged like she'd been crying. Behind her, Marcus's secretary was apologizing profusely. "I'm sorry, Mr. Foster. She just pushed past me." "It's fine, Angela." Marcus gestured for her to leave and close the door. Nicole stared at me with a mixture of anger and desperation. "David, what the hell is wrong with you? You won't answer your phone, you disappear all night, and now I find out you're filing for divorce?" "Sit down, Nicole," Marcus said professionally. "I have papers for you to review." "I don't want to sit down." She turned to me. "David, talk to me. We can work this out." "There's nothing to work out," I said calmly. "You humiliated me in public. You chose Richard Caldwell over our marriage. Now you get to live with that choice." "It was just a joke. Richard was drunk. I was drunk. It didn't mean anything." "Then why didn't you get off his lap? Why didn't you tell him to stop when he threw your underwear at me? Why didn't you defend me in front of all those people?" She didn't have an answer for that. Or rather she did, but couldn't say it out loud because she'd enjoyed it. Enjoyed being the center of attention. Enjoyed having powerful men compete for her. Enjoyed exercising power over me. "I made a mistake," she said finally, tears starting. "People make mistakes, David. You're supposed to forgive me." "I'm supposed to forgive you?" I laughed. Nicole, you didn't apologize. You told me I was being childish. You made excuses, you blamed alcohol. But you never once said you were sorry or acknowledged that. What you did was wrong. Marcus slid the papers across the table. Mrs. Morrison, these are divorce papers. You can review them with your own attorney if you'd like, but the basic terms are straightforward. Assets will be divided according to Illinois law, which means roughly 50-50 split. Mr. Morrison is not seeking alimony, and neither should you since you make comparable income. Nicole snatched the papers, scanning them quickly. Her face went from red to pale as she read. You're taking half of everything? After all I've done for you? I supported your career. I networked for you. I made you look good at company events. And I paid for your MBA, I said. Supported you through 3 job changes. Bought you a BMW last year. I'd say we're even. This is insane. She threw the papers down. I'm not signing anything. That's your right, Marcus said. But the divorce will proceed either way. Illinois doesn't require mutual consent. This just makes it easier and cheaper for everyone. Nicole looked at me with something like genuine emotion for the first time since she'd burst in. David, please, don't do this. I love you. No, you don't. You love what I represented. The successful husband, the nice house, the comfortable life. But you don't love me. If you did, you would never have done what you did last night. She stood there for another moment, then grabbed the papers and walked out without another word. That went well, Marcus said dryly. Better than expected, actually. I thought she'd fight harder. Oh, she will. Give her a few hours to process and call her attorney. Then the real battle starts. He checked his watch. Now, let's talk about your meeting with the SEC. I've got an old law school friend who works in their enforcement division. She's expecting our call. By noon, I was sitting in a federal building downtown, laying out the case against Richard Caldwell to 2 SEC investigators and an FBI agent. They listened intently, asked detailed questions, and by the end of the 3-hour meeting, they were requesting copies of all my documentation. Mr. Morrison, the lead SEC investigator said, this is extremely serious. If what you're saying is accurate, we're looking at multiple felonies. Securities fraud, wire fraud, possibly money laundering. But I need to warn you, going after a C-level executive at a major firm is going to get messy. They'll come after your credibility. They'll dig into your personal life. Are you prepared for that? My personal life just exploded last night, I said. They can't hurt me any more than I'm already hurt. The FBI agent, a woman named Sarah Chen, who looked too young to have the authority she clearly possessed, leaned forward. There's something else you should know. We've been looking into Sterling Financial for 6 months. Anonymous tip about irregularities in their M&A division. But we haven't had enough evidence to move forward. What you're bringing us could be the break we need. That caught me off guard. Someone else reported them? Can't say who, but your timing is good. Very good. She smiled slightly. It's almost like someone wanted Richard Caldwell to get overconfident and make a mistake. I thought about Jennifer Park, the CFO who'd looked at me with concern last night. Thought about how she'd been passed over for promotion twice when Richard got elevated instead. Wondered if she'd been the one to tip off the feds, then waited for Richard to hang himself. How long until you move on this? I asked. Depends on how fast we can verify your information, the SEC investigator said. Could be weeks, could be months. In the meantime, you need to act completely normal at work. Don't change your behavior. Don't tip anyone off that you've talked to us. Can you do that? I can do that. But as it turned out, I didn't have to. When I got back to my car, I had a voicemail from Sterling Financial's HR director asking me to come to the office immediately for a meeting. The tone was formal, clipped, and I knew exactly what it meant. Richard Caldwell was trying to fire me before I could destroy him. I drove to the office and took the elevator to the executive floor. The HR director, Patricia Walsh, was waiting with a security guard and a cardboard box containing the contents of my desk. David, please come in, she said, her voice professionally sympathetic in a way that made it clear she'd done this before. I walked into the conference room where, just 16 hours earlier, Richard had humiliated me. He wasn't here now. Neither was anyone from the executive team except Patricia. David, due to recent behavioral issues and concerns about your judgment, we're placing you on administrative leave effective immediately, Patricia said, sliding papers across the table. You'll continue to receive your salary for 30 days while we conduct an investigation into allegations of workplace misconduct. What allegations? I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics, but I will say that your behavior at last night's event raised serious concerns about your professional conduct. I almost laughed. They were firing me for being humiliated, for being the victim of Richard's public mockery. It was so absurd that I couldn't even be angry about it. Let me guess, I said. Richard Caldwell filed a complaint about me? I can't discuss who filed what, but you need to sign these papers acknowledging the administrative leave and return your building access card. I signed without reading them, took my box of belongings, handed over my access card, and walked out of Sterling Financial for what I assumed would be the last time. The security guard escorted me to my car like I was a criminal. People I'd worked with for 6 years watched from the windows, probably wondering what I'd done to deserve the perp walk. I loaded my box into the trunk, got behind the wheel, and sat there for a moment processing what had just happened. Then I called Marcus Foster. "They fired me," I said when he answered. "Actually, they put you on administrative leave, which is different. And it's also the stupidest thing they could have done." "Why?" "Because now you have retaliation claims on top of everything else. You reported concerns about financial irregularities, and they responded by removing you from the building. That's textbook retaliation, and it's going to cost them millions." I started laughing. Couldn't help it. In the span of 16 hours, I'd lost my wife, my job, and apparently my mind, because I was laughing in a parking garage like a crazy person. "Dave, you okay?" "I'm great, Marcus. I'm absolutely great. Call the SEC and tell them Richard Caldwell just fired the whistleblower. Let's see how they like that." I hung up and drove back to Tyler's house, where I spent the rest of the afternoon lying on his couch, staring at the ceiling, and wondering how my life had fallen apart so completely, and why I felt so free. The next 6 weeks were a blur of legal meetings, depositions, and watching my old life disintegrate from a distance. Nicole hired an aggressive divorce attorney who immediately went after everything I owned. The house, the cars, half my retirement fund, even my grandfather's watch that had been in my family for 3 generations. "She's going scorched earth," Marcus explained during one of our marathon strategy sessions. Classic post-infidelity guilt translated into aggression. She can't admit she was wrong, so she's trying to prove you're the villain. Meanwhile, the SEC and FBI investigation into Richard Caldwell was moving faster than anyone expected. Within 3 weeks, they'd frozen Sterling Financial's assets and served subpoenas on Richard, the CFO, and 6 other executives. The story hit the Chicago Tribune on a Tuesday morning. Major financial firm under federal investigation for fraud. I was sitting in Tyler's kitchen when I saw the article, drinking coffee and reading about the destruction of my former employer. The story didn't name me as the whistleblower, but it detailed allegations of systematic fraud in the mergers and acquisitions division dating back 3 years. Estimated losses to investors, $45 million. My phone started ringing immediately. Former colleagues wanting to know what I knew. Reporters asking for comments. Even Nicole called, her voice panicked. "David, did you do this? Did you report Richard to the government?" "I reported criminal activity, Nicole, just like any ethical person would." "Do you have any idea what this is going to do to our assets? Sterling Financial is collapsing. Your stock options are worthless. We're going to lose everything in the divorce." "I already lost everything that mattered," I said. "Money's just money." She hung up on me. The divorce proceedings took another turn when Nicole's attorney discovered that I'd withdrawn $90,000 from our joint savings account the day after the party. In reality, I'd moved it to a separate account to prevent her from draining it during the divorce, but her lawyer spun it as hiding assets. "Your client is engaging in financial malfeasance," Nicole's attorney, a shark named Douglas Reardon, said during a contentious meeting. "He's deliberately trying to impoverish his wife." "My client protected marital assets from being dissipated," Marcus countered, "especially given that Mrs. Morrison has been spending approximately $3,000 per week on personal expenses since the separation. Designer clothes, spa treatments, dinners at expensive restaurants, all charged to joint credit cards." That was news to me. I looked at the statements Marcus slid across the table, showing Nicole's spending spree over the past month. She'd bought a new Gucci purse, 3 pairs of Louboutin shoes, and had gotten Botox injections, all while claiming poverty. "My client is coping with an extremely stressful situation," Reardon said. "She's entitled to maintain her lifestyle." "Her lifestyle was funded by my client's income," Marcus shot back. "Income he no longer has thanks to retaliatory termination by the company her affair partner runs." We glared at each other across the conference table while Nicole sat there looking like she wanted to disappear. The real explosion came when Richard Caldwell was arrested. Federal agents showed up at his Lake Forest mansion at 6 a.m. on a Thursday and perp walked him out in handcuffs while news helicopters filmed from above. The charges: securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. Maximum sentence: 30 years in federal prison. His mugshot was all over the news by noon. And by evening, Nicole showed up at Tyler's house looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Can we talk?" she asked when Tyler answered the door. "He doesn't want to see you," Tyler said, starting to close the door. "It's okay," I called from inside. "Let her in." Nicole walked into the living room where I was watching the news coverage of Richard's arrest. She sat down on the opposite end of the couch, keeping distance between us. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "for everything. You were right about Richard, about me, about all of it." "Okay. That's it? Just okay?" "What do you want me to say, Nicole? That I forgive you? That we can work it out? That's not going to happen." "I know. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I destroyed, what I threw away." She wiped her eyes. "Richard's attorney called me today. They want me to testify that he was with me the night of several alleged meetings with co-conspirators. They want me to give him an alibi." "Are you going to?" "I don't know. If I refuse, I could be subpoenaed. If I lie, I could go to prison for perjury." She laughed bitterly. "I really screwed up, didn't I?" "Yeah, you did." We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the news replay Richard's arrest for the 5th time that hour. "The house is going into foreclosure," Nicole said quietly. "I can't afford the mortgage payments on my own, and the bank won't refinance with all this uncertainty. That's not my problem anymore." "I know. I just thought you should know." She stood up. "I'm moving back to Iowa. My parents said I can stay with them while I figure things out. Start over somewhere people don't know about this mess." "Good luck with that." She walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "For what it's worth, David, you deserved better than me. I hope you find someone who appreciates what a good man you are." After she left, Tyler came and sat down next to me. "You okay?" "Yeah, I think I finally am." The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Nicole got half of what little was left after Sterling Financial's collapse. I got my freedom and a settlement from Sterling Financial's insurance carrier for wrongful termination. $1.2 million, plus attorney's fees. Richard Caldwell pleaded guilty to avoid trial and got 15 years in federal prison. His wife divorced him. His kids wouldn't take his calls. His Lake Forest mansion was seized and auctioned off to pay restitution to the investors he'd defrauded. As for me, I took the settlement money and started my own financial consulting firm, specializing in forensic accounting and fraud detection. Turns out that destroying your boss's criminal empire makes for excellent credentials. Within 6 months, I had more clients than I could handle. I'm sitting in my new office now, looking out at the Chicago River, thinking about that night at the party, about the dollar bill and the underwear, about how Richard Caldwell thought he'd destroyed me with one act of public humiliation. He was wrong. He didn't destroy me. He freed me. Freed me from a fake marriage, a toxic job, and the illusion that success meant anything if you achieved it by compromising your integrity. The dollar bill is framed on my wall now. A reminder that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is actually the best thing. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are, and sometimes the guy who tries to pay you $1 for your dignity ends up paying with everything he has. I heard Richard tried to call me from prison last month. Left a message with my assistant saying he wanted to apologize. I deleted it without listening. Some people don't deserve your forgiveness. They just deserve the consequences of their choices. Nicole sends me a Christmas card every year from Iowa. I don't open them. And me? I'm doing better than I ever did at Sterling Financial. I've got my dignity back, my integrity, and a business built on helping other people expose fraud before it destroys them. That's worth more than any amount of money Richard Caldwell could have offered, even if it is just $1.